and from the African Economic Research Consortium. To the Honorable Minister, Mr. Festus Keyamo, represented by Dr. Martina, the Senior Advisor with Brightstone Bridge, Mr. Ekenem Isiche, the Senior Manager, Global Government Relations and Public Policy, Mr. Ridwan Sorunke, the Managing Partner of Sahel Consulting, Mr. Teme Adegoroye, the Managing Director, Edo State Public Service Academy, Ms. Precious Ajonu, the Country Manager, Deputy MD Africa, Fertilizer Nigeria Limited, Caleb Bosso, the Executive Director of NESG, all protocols observed. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of AERC, I want to bring the remarks from our institute representing our Executive Director. First and foremost, as all of us know, this is work and income for young men and women in Africa. Generally, we refer to this project as Growth Sectors for Youth Employment Project. And we are here for an in-country dissemination workshop. Basically, we are doing a number of in-country dissemination workshops. This is a study which we carried in 9 countries. And thankfully, Nigeria is one of them. But just before I go ahead, I just want to say that African Economic Research Consortium is a research institution in Africa, which is known by many economists, and we focus on capacity building to deal with problems affecting management of African economies. So we normally have key programs, training, research, policy outreach programs, and we have mentored over 4,200 economic researchers from 35 countries, 3,800 masters granted, and over 400 PhD grantees. Of course, most of these are in mid to senior level policymakers across the continent. So in terms of impact, I would say AERC has done quite much in as far as that is concerned. And so at this juncture, probably we can meet at the end of the meeting and chat quite a number of things about our institute. Now to the project. The youth unemployment remains a significant problem across Africa. And of course, it is estimated that over 54 million young Africans are not employed, and education, or rather they are not in employment, they are not in education or training. And out of this, we know that the young people are 3 times as likely as adults to be unemployed. The more reason we are looking into this particular project. Going forward, even young women are disproportionately affected. Being an International Women's Day, this is something that is also very key to our hearts. So out of the 15 million of the young Africans who are not in employment, education, or training, actually around 62% in 2021 were female. So that is quite a higher percentage. So we would have expected, or we expect this number even to have gone up because of the COVID-19 pandemic that came in 2020. So we expect these percentages to have gone up. So though 1 in 3 young people are employed, they are often engaged in poor quality jobs. So we may not say that as much they're employed, they're in these good jobs that we would like them to be in. So it makes them become a little bit more vulnerable to job losses and poverty. And lack of these productive opportunities is one of the key main drivers of the youth unemployment problem. Of course, you know that our youth would love productive opportunities where, of course, they could be engaged further. Other issues, of course, are inequalities, whereby we are looking at the employment opportunities across gender, socioeconomic status, and geographical location. We find quite a number of inequalities. And so to provide prospects for our youth and women in Africa, we require policies to create new jobs that are decent and sustainable in the long term. And so policy solutions should include measures to support sectors with the highest potential to create jobs for young people. And this is one of the key aims of this particular project. We're also looking at those sectors that have high potential to create jobs for young people. This is despite of what all of us know that has been going on. So we would love to take another trajectory so that we are able to know which are these specific sectors. Now, for this particular project, I would just want at this juncture to acknowledge the implementation partners. We have not done it alone across the 9 countries. We have had the Overseas Development Institute, the Economic Research Forum, and of course, the African Economic Research as the lead institution. And further to that, we have had the Include Knowledge Platform as our supporters. They had the one who have funded this project. And so the aims of this project is basically, as I've said, to identify promising economic sectors for job creation among young men and women in the 9 countries in Africa, which I'm going to mention in a few minutes. We also need to determine country-specific conditions needed for local and foreign private investors to invest in these sectors and value chains. We also need to identify the country-specific actors that are needed to create the conditions that are needed for the local and foreign investors that enhance or reduce investment security, and of course, explore ways to promote equal access and opportunities among the youth. As we have done the study in 9 countries. Of course, we started with the framework part of it that set the pace for the country case studies. This week and last week, we have continued with in-country dissemination workshops. Today, we are in Nigeria. There's another one ongoing in Mozambique. The day after tomorrow, we'll be having another one in Senegal. So the 9 countries, Ethiopia, Egypt, Kenya, Mali, Nigeria, Senegal, Tunisia, and Uganda. These are the main countries that we have had to do this study on. So what we are doing right now is ongoing with in-country dissemination workshop. We are in workshop 4 now. We have already done the preliminary findings, the final review. Now we are doing in-country. And of course, on March 28th, we'll be having the regional policy forum. It's already on our social platforms, and all of us are included so that we can contribute. So what do we expect at the end of this particular dissemination workshop? We are working around the gender aspect in this particular study. So at the end of this workshop, we would expect at least to come up with the most promising sectors and activities that have the potential to improve the youth and women employment. We'd also expect to have increased awareness, understanding of the issues constraining access to employment, potential strategies to promote equal access and opportunity, and of course, strengthened cooperation and networking among the stakeholders seated in this meeting. And we would expect which are the further areas of research so that we can improve work and income among the youth. So with those few remarks, I would like to wish us a fruitful engagement in this workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I'll be presenting on behalf of myself and my partner, Genesis B. Colley. We'll be presenting on sectoral development, assessing the conditions that drive youth employment in key sectors of the Nigerian economy under the work and income for youth and for young men and women in Africa growth sector for youth. So as a background to this study, we know that over the years, unemployment has been on the increase. And due to this, sorry, the slide is not moving and I'm trying to stop my laptop. Please, the next slide. Okay, in recent time, there's been increased focus on youth. And we know that there are several definitions for youth. According to the African Union Charter, which refers to youth as any person between the ages of 15 and 35, while under the new Nigerian policy for 2019 to 2023, youths are referred to as people between the ages of 15 and 29. We know that Nigeria has an estimated population of about 2 million persons, and a third of them accounts for the youths that we have. Looking at the disaggregation by female and male, we have realized that females account for 51.6% and the males account for 48.4%. Those are people within the ages of 15 to 34. With a rapid growth population of over 3% yearly, we have realized that if care is not taken by 2050, Nigerian youth will have risen to, population in Nigeria will have risen to about 200 million persons. The Nigerian labor market is complex because we have a high level of unemployment as well as underemployment. And we know that this condition has been on the increase because some of the data we use stem from 2010 to 2019. And we know that this challenge has been on the increase. And it became more glaring in 2015 because of the fall in oil prices. Next slide, please. We know that there's a high incidence of unemployment in Nigeria, and this can be attributed to slow pace of sorry for the break. Okay, so there's high unemployment incidence in Nigeria, and it can be attributed to the slow pace of job creation, which has considerably weakened the labor force growth in Nigeria. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, we realized that unemployment rate in Nigeria rose from 23.1% in the third quarter of 2018 to 27.1% in the second quarter of 2020. signifying that 21.7 million persons are unemployed, out of which 13.9 million are Nigerian youths. The Nigerian economy presents a unique situation because according to what Dr. Umishaki said, we realize that when youths are unemployed, we have high incidences of kidnapping, of armed robbery, of negative vices. And we know that if we do not work on reducing the rate of unemployment in the country, we are going to have bigger problems. So we knew that over time, economic growth has been witnessed in the country and it's still increasing, but we've had problems of jobless growth. As the economy is increasing, we do not have employment alongside. So we know that in tackling this problem, we need to identify the sectors that will actually stimulate growth and stimulate employment, especially for youth, as well as identifying enabling environments through which investors will be willing to invest in these sectors that we have identified. So based on this, we have identified specific objectives that this study looked at. The first one was to determine the trend of youth employment and economic growth in Nigeria. Then secondly, we identified the promising economic sectors for job creation potentials for young men and women in Nigeria. We also analyzed the differential impact of sectoral growth on youth employment across rural as well as gender lines. Then we identified key economic and political constraints to developing key sectors relevant for youth employment. Then finally, we determined the specific conditions that are required in Nigeria for local and foreign private sector investment in the identified sectors. So the next slide, which presents the objective matrix, we're trying to see how, in what way do we achieve the objective that we have identified. And we really made it a, high incidence of unemployment. This is not surprising because we know that a lot of youths in Nigeria, they actually engage in something, not like they don't engage. But the question is it an employment that is befitting their qualification or something? So we know that they do one or two things, but a lot of them are not giving their best to their potentials in such jobs. So looking at the second slide, we try to look at what was happening in employment in the rural areas as well as in the urban areas. We realized that a lot of people, that's the males, especially in the rural areas, were more employed compared to the females. For the males, we had to question why. Then we realized, yes, they're employed because, they engage in manual labor. A lot of people that are educated in the urban centers will say, why would I want to go and carry a block or something? So, yes, we have figures to show that. And coupled with the fact that this data is for agricultural households. So it's really obvious that, yes, definitely you have a high incidence of employment in the rural area. Same also with the third figure. We categorized employment based on 5 sectors. We looked at it. We looked at construction, industrial, agriculture. We looked at services as well as services, the 5 sectors. And we realized that there was higher level of employment in the service sector compared to the other sectors. We had more males in construction and industry compared to females. It begins to raise questions in our mind. Why is that happening? One would say, the females are not qualified. But the question is, right from the beginning in schools, how many females are engaged in courses where you end up being an engineer or something? If you take statistics, you realize that we have lower level of females engaged in this sector. And where does it start from? Right from the beginning. You do not need to go to university. I've gotten to this stage. We realize that we need to go back. We need to work on our curriculums. We need to educate parents and say, these sectors are not only for men. We need to go beyond what we've been doing in the past. Then looking at sectoral contribution to employment and GDP, as we all know, we always say agriculture is the backbone of the economy. Yes, that's true. So looking at the contribution, we realized that agriculture contributed about 46.45% to employment. That's true, yes. But the more we look at it, we realize that there's even a shift from agriculture to other sectors. Why do we have a shift? Now we are becoming more mechanized. We are trending the paths that other industrialized nations have gone Two, we are having reduction in the number of people that are actually working. So definitely, they're actually working physically on farms. We have introduction of drones, what people would normally do. There are people doing it. We have commercialized farms. You have bigger farms now taking over. There are issues, of course, all of this end up, it's always around land grabbing, but we know that there's more focus now on mechanization. We have contribution, mining was actually very low. Yes, it's understandable because it's not like everybody is involved in certain sectors. Then we had the manufacturing. Manufacturing is interesting because we know that now we are advocating, do not export primary products out of the country, export processed products. You get higher value for money when you export processed commodities. So there's a shift towards manufacturing. We have construction also. We have the real estate. Fine, yes, there are a lot of people building and all of that. Even if it's a one-room apartment, you're willing to move to your own apartment. And other contributions, according to share of GDP, how many of the sectors are contributing a higher portion to GDP? We realize that agriculture is still one of the toppers, coupled with business services. In this case, business services, we are looking at information and communication technology. We have gone far now. We know we are not where we used to be. We are moving with the trends, although we are not there yet. But we know now that there's a lot of reliance, especially during the COVID. A lot of people became used to using technologies. You don't need to go to the bank again to get some things done that you will have done before by queuing. Nobody wants to queue. And coupled with the fear of coronavirus, you'd rather stay in your home and get some things done. So we realized that. Then in identifying economic sectors, we wanted to do this. So we decided, let's go in a three-pronged approach. Let's look at it. We just do not want to depend on what is existing. Let's look at areas in which Nigeria has comparative advantage. What are we exporting? What can we do better? What areas do we have untapped potential in? We needed to identify such sectors. We needed to look at the areas in our country where we have established clusters. We want to know what are the employment elasticities? Which area will generate more employment? So we used these approaches. Based on this, we have realized that Nigeria has several policies in place. Some of them, yes, some of them work, some of them are over. We have seen lots of interventions. Some we have learned from the mistakes that we noticed. So for some of this, we have the economic recovery and growth plan. Some of these areas are targeted towards specific sectors. For this one, it's targeted at agriculture, manufacturing, housing, and construction. The aim is to foster infrastructural development. We know that Nigeria actually has issues with infrastructure. If a lot of farmers will always complain and tell you, oh, the feeder roads are so bad, we incur more costs moving our commodities from the farm gate directly to the market. So we know if some of these issues are treated, we know that there will be higher output. Then we also have the national employment policy. The aim of this is actually to create an enabling environment for productive and employment intensity growth in Nigeria. Then the national youth policy, I'll just skim a bit. These are policies that are existing. Some of them are directly targeted at youth, while some are targeted at the general population, but there's no how you have a general population that you don't have the youth embedded. So we rest on these existing policies so that we can drive out, tease out, policy recommendations that would affect the youth. So there's also the National Digital Economy Policy. A very key one is NC. At the moment, we know, yes, a lot of youth are being employed as extension agents. There are 4 arms, there's N-Agro, there's N-Health, there's N-Education. That's what is happening right now. Many youth, over 500,000 are engaged, there are different cohorts, and we've realized that it's working, we agree. We've had issues, we've had the Shopee project, we've had the GIS. Of course, I was a beneficiary of GIS anyway. So I know some of these things worked and some of them, they would have worked, but we had issues. Like if you look at the next slide where we had existing interventions, some of them, the conditions that were meted out for the organizations were strict. So some of the organizations could not benefit or partake out of this. And in cases where some benefited, they had some weird, practices that maybe because we didn't have so much monitoring and evaluation, some of these projects could not achieve the main aim for which they were established. So I'll just jump and okay, for the sectors, we looked across the agroecological zones in Nigeria or the geopolitical zones, and we realized that in the agriculture sector alone, there are several commodities that we have that are grown in massive proportion. Nigeria on its own is capable and able to actually provide what we need in the country without even importing. So we looked and we realized in the Northwest, we have rice production in large mass. There are places in Nasarawa have been there in the past, and we realized there's so much you can feed the nation. We can export in large droves. We just need to work on our infrastructure. We need to look at things that we are not getting right. We need to look at what they're doing elsewhere and work on that. So in the Northeast, we have wheat, yam. Across all the sectors, there are different commodities. And we also realize that looking at the industrial hubs, there are clusters around these areas. And these clusters, some of them already have existing infrastructure in good conditions. Some of them are lacking some things. We feel if there's something done, either by the government or private investors, if something is done about this infrastructure, it will go a long way in bridging the gaps that we've identified. So some of these clusters are for tomatoes, rice. We have for poultry and feed production. Under the construction and industry sector, Nigeria is one of the blessed countries in the world, I tell you, because one, we have a large deposit of natural resources. We have limestone all over the place. We have tin in Jos. We need to harness some of these potentials and we will be able to rise up above where we are. There's the auto and industrial spare part fabricator in Newi. We are able to do things within the country. We don't need to rely on people outside anymore. Then a large tannery, leather tannery in Kano, there are lots of animals. We just need to look inward. That's just it. From under this sector, we realized that the Nigerian Industrial Revolution Plan, the main aim is to promote industry as a key employer and for income generation. And the aim of this plan is actually to identify priority sectors and promote competitiveness. Then for wholesale and retail trade, we have realized that there are several clusters too, some for retail and some for wholesale. We have the Komi Artifacts Retail Cluster in Kano. We have the Dawano Grain Retail Cluster in Kano also. These are places that all over in Africa, they are known. A lot of people come there to purchase grains. It means we need to rise upon what we have and look inward. We have this thing. So it means we need to rise up above ourselves. We have the Oshoba at the red. There's high demand for textiles from Nigeria. Then the Alaba retail market, African leather production clusters. Then looking at the trade indices, looking at from the trade aspect, what products do we have comparative advantage in? Nigeria trades 205 products. Out of the 205, we have comparative advantage in 17 products. Out of the 17 products, more than half of the products are actually petroleum products. But for the ones that are not petroleum products, we have cocoa. Yes, right from the beginning, we've been producing cocoa. We are number 4 in the world. We're number 3 in Africa. So these are things that we need to work on. We need to go back to where we missed it, then work on it. We have things such as spices. Some people actually, export spices. We have leather, there's wood. If we are saying, oh, we will not focus so much on the main agriculture sector, there are subsectors. We could look at forestry. Oh, there's so much talk on climate change now. There's so much talk on REDD++. We need to look, how do we harness potentials in this sector sustainably without injuring our coverage within the country? Then we also try to look at our level of diversification. Yes, we agree that the bulk of our products are all products, but we realize that there are certain commodities that we had been trading, but not at our utmost capacity, that we need to look at. What are these commodities? We realize that we need to focus on cashew nuts, we need to focus on sesame, we need to focus on wood in itself. We have high potentials for these commodities. In fact, the untapped potential that Nigeria has for some of these commodities is between $2.2 billion. Then even in the cashew, you have $488 million as the untapped potential for cashew nuts. Then finally, we looked at employment elasticities. Initially, we looked at the 3 key sectors. We wanted to know what is driving what. And we realized from the three key sectors, services, as we earlier said, was the one driving employment across all sectors, followed by agriculture industry. To have a deeper understanding of what is happening within these three sectors, we decided to disaggregate. So we used a 12-sector approach. In this case, when we disaggregated and we looked at the employment elasticities, we realized that the main sector driving employment was the financial sector. The question we had to ourselves, why is it driving? Then it occurred to us, yes, a lot of people don't want to queue. We have lots of point of sales centers around town. You will not go from a place to a place. You have people diversifying. You have the fintech taking over. We are beyond, okay, it's the normal bank. I have to go to the bank and all of that. Insurance, there's high demand for insurance right now. So this sector is also one of the sectors driving employment. Then we have the transport system. Transport system to a great extent revolves around infrastructure. Nigeria is home to over 200 million people. So there's demand for the products from the country. And we also bring in things. Some of them at the intermediate level. We need it for further production. So we need to, we realize that there's avenue to work on this infrastructure in terms of the rail. Is it the port? There's so much we can do. Even the road networks. You understand? Okay. So for government services as well as business services, that's information and communication technology, as I earlier mentioned. These are sectors we need to build upon also. Then in order for us to measure the differential impact of sectoral group on youth employment by gender, we disaggregated. We wanted to know what was driving what within the sector. So we had employed females and employed males. For this, we realized that we had some interesting results. Okay, so a summary of this result is given here. We realized the increase in age will stimulate male employment. There are some employers that feel that the more mature the youth is or a man is, the more he will be willing to work hard and give his best. So we felt that was what was driving age, increase in age for employment. Then there was high school education. Of course, the general assumption is the more educated you are, the higher the likelihood of being employed, especially in the formal sector. Then we had issues of remittances as well as marital status, which was driving employment amongst females. Yes, females assist the males, especially the married ones. So when they are married, there's a higher tendency is you want to give your children the best, so you seek for employment. Then remittances also. But the interesting part was based on the 5 categories of the sectors we identified in this study, we realized that youth employment, although agriculture was not significant, we realized that male employment was driven by the industrial sector, construction sector, as well as services, while female employment was driven by the trade sector. Well, one could question why. Trade sector does not, it hardly requires specialized skills to enter. So there's this thing that will say the females are employed as maybe petty traders. Hardly will you go to a place, a street, and you not see a woman manning a shop. Then we also have the males now. Yes, they are involved in services too, but for the males, we ask ourselves, why? Okay, could it be based on their education? A lot of them are employed in this sector. Could it be based on their strength? Especially for the lower skilled positions, most men will go into such sectors. Then geographically speaking, we realized that more males from the South and Southeast were less likely to secure jobs as compared to their female partners. Well, this is interesting because we realized that in the Southwest, in the South, females and males go for education. They're educated at all levels, compared to probably the northern part of the country, if you look at the ratio of females to males that are employed. So it's not surprising that you have more males employed in the Northwest and Northeast compared to South and Southwest. Then in order to identify constraints to investment, this was one of the objectives. We looked at the enterprise survey conducted by the World Bank, and we realized that the key constraints to investment in key sectors in Nigeria was access to finance. A lot of people will tell you that we do not have access to finance because even when we've already started, we want to upgrade, we don't have funds. There are stringent conditions given at the bank in terms of loan and all of that. Then we also had the problem of electricity. We know that electricity is a key challenge. You pay a lot of money, you pay money on fuel. Even if you end up getting a generator, you incur more cost, more production cost when you have to rely on external power sources compared to probably from the national grid. Then there was also issue of corruption. From a study that was conducted by MBS, they stated that several people said they had to give a form of bribe at one point or the other to get something done compared to not getting results. So it means you don't give something, you don't get something. Then we had issues of tax rates. Some complained that they had higher tax rate. Interestingly, we know we always, there's always this thing of, oh, our staffs are not well trained. Oh, the graduates that are coming. But a lot of industries said that was just 0.45 said inadequately educated workforce. So they are saying that really the challenge is not that these youth are not skilled, but we feel that there are more issues that we need to deal with. Even if we employ this youth, we can train them to become who we want them to be. So that's what they are showing us here from this. We did a key informant interview and we realized that some of these facts, some of this information that we had identified from the enterprise survey were also some things that they also raised. In order for business startups, some of the key problems we realized compared to other countries. In Nigeria, it will take you 16.5 days to obtain construction-related permits. In some countries, it's not as high as that. Then other things that has to do with days to obtain import license, it takes you roughly 18.8 days. In some countries, it's just 9 days. So the more time you spend getting your business established and some other things, you realize that the higher it is for you to get okay. So in some of this, for the key informant interview, we realized that across the sectors, the key problems they had was access to finance, then infrastructure, they were poorly developed. And in cases where some of them were okay, they felt things needed to be done. We had issues of skills mismatch. Now, a common thing in Nigeria is you'll see a person that studies something else in something else, doing something else. These are common issues that we have. Then for conditions that stimulate local and foreign private investors to invest in identified sectors. Some of these conditions, we realize that some of them has to do with providing access to finance. This is almost like the reverse of the challenges we identified. We need consistency in our policies. We want continuity. So they identified continuity. There are issues that has to do with political stability. There are businesses moving out of the country or relocating from the Northeast with the issues of instability. There's a move. Then again, some commodities we're getting easily. We don't get them easily again because of the threat to human lives. We also have issues of land and property securities, amongst others. These are some of the things we need to address. Then in conclusion, I would like to say that this study assessed the conditions that drive youth employment in key economic sectors of the Nigerian economy by identifying the promising economic sectors for job creation. Then we as I earlier stated, we used both primary and secondary data. We had realized that employment was highest amongst rural male and lowest among urban females. Then having used several methods, we have realized that Nigeria has comparative advantage in production of commodities such as cocoa, fuel, wood. So we could focus on the forestry sector as well. Wood in the rough, leather, natural rubber. There are several trade clusters that have been identified, and we need to harness the potentials in these places by working on the infrastructure there, and also working on tax-related reforms as well. Then the finding from the study also showed that the employment elasticities for the 12 sectors, it ranged between 0.056 to 0.734. And the highest contributor was from the financial sector, while the lowest was from the manufacturing sector. And the main sectors with potential for growth include financial, transportation, as well as business services, construction. In order to analyze the differential impact on youth employment across rural and urban areas, as well as on gender lines, we have identified age, marital status, remittances, higher education, occupation, that's in industry, construction, as well as service sector, increases for male youth as compared to females where it's only in the trade sector. Similarly, we have identified some key challenges, and we feel that based on all of this, our recommendation is that despite the fact that the 12 sectors have potentials for job creation at different levels, it's important to focus more attention on sectors such as the financial services, transportation, business services, construction, other services, and agriculture, because they have high growth employment intensities. Secondly, since more males are likely to be employed in the industry, construction services, and agriculture sector as compared to female youth, we are saying that it's better we strengthen these sectors through targeted welfare reforms by enhancing the capacity of the youths for sectoral relevance, and also in order to promote startups in this sector, it's important to provide access to funds, as well as this is especially for youths that have undergone a form of entrepreneurial study. Then governments, as we feel it's not all about the government. Now we feel there's a need for the government to work together with the private sector as well as civil society so that they can attract investors by encouraging public-private partnership in a politically stable economy. It's important that we achieve political stability by using fiscal and monetary instruments through substantial reduction of taxes or the introduction of tax holidays, as the case may be in some cases, or through provision of matching funds, as some organization does, like NESG Economy, that promotes entrepreneurship as well as employability tract, or the introduction of favorable lending or exchange rate policies. Then government should build and improve on existing infrastructure. This is key in terms of logistic, road, the port, train, railway, and all of that. Then communication also, power, energy, water, increase the supply to this. All of these can be set up at various strategic positions, not necessarily centralized. Once we've identified areas where the country is doing very well, we can strategically locate some of these infrastructures there. Then, as insecurity is a key challenge, we feel this needs to be addressed, especially in the northeastern part of the country. It's very important to address this issue by finding a sustainable solution so that investors will not migrate from this place. And in driving growth in the transport sector, we need to learn from other economies that have actually that have been successful. We could learn from Denmark, we could learn from Australia. They've actually achieved success in this. We could learn from them. Then the government can formulate and implement favorable policies that promote public-private partnership, through which skills acquisition centers and empowerment programs will be established. Also, there's a need to monitor and constantly evaluate empowerment programs that are set in place so that they achieve their aims of reducing youth employment, amongst others. Thank you for listening.
I can hear you, Dora.
Hear us?
Okay, if you can hear us, I would like to ask, so what structural issues do you think limit the manufacturing sector's productivity and ability to create jobs for youth in Nigeria?
Thanks, Dora. First of all, just thank the African Economic Research Consortium for that in-depth research. Over the past couple of days, I did review the research, and one striking insight was the low share of the manufacturing sector to actually the employment numbers, right? However, before going into the structural issues, I think one thing to highlight is the potential in manufacturing, which a lot of us know. One key area of manufacturing that has proven to be that massive potential and has proven to take a number of people across key economies and also similar economies to Nigeria historically has been light manufacturing, right? And more recently, we've seen this in Ethiopia, through their leather industry. We've seen it in Vietnam, we've seen it in China, whereby, when the manufacturing industry has, deliberate push and a period of sustained growth, it's capable of actually delivering those numbers as far as employability is concerned. However, coming back to Nigeria, what are the structural issues that have limited this sector's productivity and ability to create jobs? One thing that I wanted to also call out in the research was that when you study the growth curves, right, of the country's annual GDP, as well as the manufacturing sector growth curve, you'd realize that the manufacturing growth curves mimics the country GDP. So as a result, when the country's economy goes into deep dive, the manufacturing sector also goes into deep dive as well. And that's because of the level of exposure of these sectors to the core levers of the economy. So over the past couple of years, about 6-7 years, we've had 2 recessions, one in 2015-16, as a result of the global oil prices, which also affected the country's FX earnings. And second was, at the heart of COVID, back in 2020, 2021, where, we had this COVID-triggered recession. And as a result, led to supply chain complexities where, several industries couldn't actually produce for a long period of time. But thankfully, we were able to come out of that. So some of these issues, on the one hand, you talk about like the economic issues. Then the second hand, you talk about, the structural issues. On the economic front, right, you would also notice that, over the past couple of years, we've had significant FX devaluation, which has led to increased cost of raw materials, especially those that are not available locally. And when cost of raw materials actually go up, you have a very significant impact on the performance of the entire industry. And as a result, the ability of the industry itself to create new jobs and sustain the old ones, right? Still on that, when we recovered between 2017 and 2021 as well, the manufacturing sector picked up, right? So for us to be able to think about having manufacturing sector drive, that growth, it's really important for us to think about, sustaining the growth of the sector as well as of the economy. On the structural lens, right, we've talked about the numbers, we've talked about, the recessions, but there are structural issues that have persisted, in the country and have always affected the manufacturing sector. One of which, you would know is the ease of doing business. While, I would like to acknowledge the work that the government has been doing over the past couple of years, which has led to at least a good level of effort as far as improving this particular area. We still have that challenge as far as the ease of doing business is concerned. Some of these would definitely relate to regulatory issues, policy inconsistencies, like some of the panelists have mentioned, which is a case of a particular ministry coming up with a policy which is in direct contrast with the other ministry's policy. So we still experience those kind of issues within the sector. And secondly is that still under this structural issue, infrastructure deficit has been there ongoing for a long period of time. I don't think it's a low-hanging fruit for us, but it's clearly an area to highlight as far as the contributors of the non-performance of the manufacturing sector as a driver of employability is concerned. Then in addition to that, we realize that, we talk about manufacturing sector, but we also need to think of it in two ways, right? We have the large scale manufacturers like my company, for example, and several other companies within the space, but there is a huge chunk of small and medium-sized manufacturers who are actually the biggest employers of labor, right? And for this specific tier, there are issues around access to affordable capital, not only just access to capital, but ensuring that the capital in itself is affordable. Second is ensuring that those SMEs actually have the right training and the capacity aided by other players within the industry as well as the government. And finally, some of the issues that has also affected the SME cluster within the manufacturing sector's ability to create the jobs is actually the need for us to do more as far as integrating these SMEs into the global value chain. So those are the key issues that we see. One on the end of the key economic issues that have actually affected the manufacturing sector, and the other really on the core structural issues that have lingered for a while. And I think that with concerted effort by the government, as well as driving additional partnerships between the private and the public sector, we can easily fix those low-hanging fruits and focus on the more medium-term challenges like the infrastructure.
Just talking about women. One of the things that we found whilst in Kano was that we had a situation where, for example, you would find very qualified women who will go for job interviews and negotiate lower than they deserved, right? We did not find the same issue with the male folk. In fact, you will find an underqualified male who is happy to quote any amount, but you'll find a woman, she has a PhD, and she's willing to earn maybe less than $1,000, for example. So one of the things that was very important for me in creating that course that is on Coursera was making sure that we had courses around the softer side of things. And let me explain what I mean. When we think about gender equality, yes, the inequality and access, we can talk infrastructural decay, we can talk public policy, but even beyond that, I want to throw some light on mainstreaming gender issues. I think it's very important that we have some sort of gender equality support group that cuts across different spectra of society. Let me go a bit further. So for example, religious leaders be part of this group. And of course, this will support the law, but even beyond the law is also implementation. We will need people from the private sector. We will need, religious leaders, traditional leaders, all coming together, in one voice to say that representation matters. It's important for us to have women in political leadership. It is important for us to have women, in private sector boardrooms. I saw that we have more women than men in Nigeria, thanks to your report. And I'm just curious as to why we don't have a Nigerian female president, for example. So I think that, yes, we should have the enabling laws, but even beyond that, we need to create awareness around women issues. And just to drive it down, especially on the cultural front, that when women succeed, everyone succeeds, right? It's not a competition, so to speak. If you empower the girl child, the village succeeds, our family succeeds, society succeeds. If we have a society that is transparent, where people know that not because I am a woman, I'm going to be cut out of certain positions, that's important. And then also just now talking specifically on, bringing more women folk into the employment basket, we need to create laws and now together with the private sector, create environments that support women. Many of us know that when a woman has a child, many men don't have that challenge. You have to return to work 3 months after you've just given birth to your child. I'm sure some of us on this panel know about the unfortunate story that went viral of a woman in Nigeria who lost her baby in a crash. So there are so many issues around that. How do we start to create workspaces where a woman can bring her child to work, for example? How do we start to create things around flexible working policies? How do we create access in our rural areas where we have very high unemployment rate amongst women? How do we formalize our informal sector where we know that we are more likely to find more women, working in the informal sector? How do we create systems, government, private sector working together, and of course, society to ensure that there is a space for women, in the workforce and how work matters. So I think it's going to, take us, government, I'm in government now, the private sector, and of course, society, civil society as well, working together to ensure that we are creating a sustainable future for ourselves, our children, and of course for girls everywhere.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think that first of all, in terms of the key recommendations, I think one of those recommendations was really trying to optimize for employment in areas where that are actually male focused per se, and then also looking at the drivers of female employment, and then building on that. I think one area that I would say, as far as the industry is concerned, is first of all, a trend in the conversation today has really been a case of, how can we ensure that, we get people to have the right skills and then to promote employment. Now, one thing that I would say is that, at Procter & Gamble, we have ensured that, irrespective of the role or irrespective of the sphere or the level of the company, we strive as much as possible to attain 50-50 representation in terms of gender balance, right? And then, we've been able to achieve that at managerial levels. And as part of, trying to do that, I think that it's really important for us in the spirit of the International Women's Day and also breaking the bias to remove, any bias whatsoever, any obstacle that is actually preventing, free and fair, employment by the gender within these various sectors. In addition to that, I think that, more work needs to be done, to promote women integration into key roles, and not only women, but also, women-owned and women-led entrepreneurs, right? Because, across board, both to the male and the female, we still have an issue of, skills. The skill gap is quite rapid in Nigeria. We have a case of, people are properly skilled, but do not have, the wherewithal or the opportunity to access those right jobs, right? So I think the first thing that we need to do while removing the bias is to ensure that, those who have the skills are able to access the jobs that are available, irrespective of whether you're a man or a woman. Number two is that, for those, and as Temi had mentioned, we have a lot of people coming out of schools that have been trained, in specific areas. However, the question is, are those skills really what the industry needs right now? As we're seeing with a case of, the tech jobs, right? There is the requirement of the industry, and there is what people is coming out from, bringing out from schools, right? So for where we have the skills gap, then we should be able to build the skill capacity to match the available jobs. And I think that that's one thing that the government is trying to do with the private sector through the Nigeria Jubilee Fellows Program, where governments is trying to bring, equal number of, male, female, folks into the Nigerian Jubilee Fellow Program to say that, these are the people that are currently unemployed, and these are, partners within the private sector, the nonprofits, that are willing and able to take you and are also looking for this kind of skills. Through that, there is a sort of an internship program that trains these people on the right skill set required by that industry. So I think that, creating that bridge, is important. Then thirdly is that, there is also a case of, underemployment, which also cuts across both the male, female gender. And I think that that's where we have to strive across the board, right? Government, private sector, to be able to put those poorly utilized skills to use. And earlier, I talked about, light manufacturing. The interesting thing about light manufacturing is that it doesn't, discriminate, by gender, by its design. The implementation, by the players may actually lead to discrimination, but, we need to be able to put some of these poorly utilized skill sets into use by leveraging the likes of agriculture and then, light manufacturing. Overall, what are we doing, as companies, right? And I know that Sahel has talked a lot about, what they are doing on the individual front, but, for us as, a multinational corporation, what we are doing is to focus more on, the SMEs within the value chain. And a key area that, we've played actively is a program we call the Women Entrepreneur Development Program, which, we do partner with key players within the industry to train a certain number of women entrepreneurs using a mini MBA curriculum, because we do understand that skills is quite important for you to be able to compete even at the board level. That's number one. Then number two was that we did create this program called the SME Academy, which is a 3-level partnership with the Ministry of Trade and Industry as well as the Bank of Industry. And the essence of this was to look at large corporations and look at ways by which you can leverage the skill set of senior executives to train SMEs on soft skills as well as soft areas like contract negotiation, procurement principles, access to finance, taxation, and things like that. So we've done that, and I think that for us to be able to put these recommendations into practice itself, we need to deepen that kind of collaboration, right? The kind of collaborations that the likes of Sahel has also leveraged in the past, and which my colleague from OCP also talked about. So it's quite important. I think we are seeing that from the private sector lens, but it's important for the government to continue to expand that space, bringing in more private sector, looking at what's happening within the private sector, creating the enabling environment for more women to be able to thrive in the workplace, looking at things like, flexible working environment, maternity leave, extended maternity leave, and even, paternity leave as well, to ensure the gender balance and equality, and to allow the, male folks to be able to share the care and share the load with the women at home. So these are the things that, I see from our perspective to ensure that, we do not only drive employability, but, we do provide the required skills and also create the enabling environment to drive, active and actual growth, for more women, irrespective of the sectors. And secondly, to sustain those growth for men, irrespective of the sectors.
Thank you for that question. So there are lots of different things. There's so many skills gap reports that show that the current curriculum that we have, and I think you touched on that in your report, is not sufficient for the future of work, if you like, which is already here according to the World Economic Forum. One of the things that I found in my former life, and that's talking about when I was head youth engagement and learning at Jobaman, was that a lot of the employers on our platform were complaining that many young people are not employable. Many of these young people had degrees, at least first degrees, at least, in some cases second degrees, and will not be successful in interviews. So we decided to do some sort of deep dive. And one of the things that we found was that, soft skills was lacking, things around innovativeness. I mean, we're living in a post-pandemic era, right? We are having conversations around, unfortunately, a possible World War III. So it means that uncertainty is now what's certain. So for you to survive as a young person in a world that is so uncertain, you have to be naturally agile. You have to be naturally innovative. You have to be creative, and things like that. And when you localize, some of the challenges that we have to Nigeria in particular, you will find that a lot of young people are already using technology to disrupt. One of the things, again, that we learned, in my previous work was where we were able to scale our training very quickly the minute we introduced, things like Coursera, which you had referenced, and other technological platforms. So what are the opportunities? And if a young person is listening to this, it might just be, how do you take what is traditional online, for example? How do I, for example, digitize the supply chain? That could be what you might be thinking about. How do I take my art online? I live in Edo State now, and we know that Edo is very rich in arts and culture. How do I create virtual tours, with the help of my mobile phone, where people can access some of these things? So there's so many opportunities that exist around disruptive spaces, innovation. And it's maybe even thinking about traditional things with a pair of new eyes. So for example, how do I make a process? How do I get palm wine from Edo State to Lagos and make sure that it's fresh and people can get it? And of course, taking into cognizance all the challenges of logistics, that has been mentioned. So it is in innovation that we really come out, because truth of the matter is, I was talking to some business leaders yesterday, and somebody said to me that, Precious, the best kept secret is that nobody really knows what's probably going to happen in 3 months. That's how uncertain our world has become. Nobody really knows. Even the best postulators are speculating. So it means that young people really, in these uncertain times, again, and especially women, have to start to think around, how to become more innovative. And then, of course, this also stretches to government, and it's very interesting to also be able to say this, but government must now, as a matter of urgency, start to provide the enabling environment for talent to grow. Because again, our population, and I think one of the speakers, panelists did mention this, and I thought that was brilliant. Population as an enabler, as we have seen in China, and some of these other countries. Every time we talk about our 3.5% year-on-year population growth rates, it's usually met with negativity, but it doesn't have to be so if we have our government as an enabler, creating the right policies, the right framework, access, so that these young people can thrive. Africa, and by extension, Nigeria, is the next frontier. And we need to start to position our young people. Yes, upskilling, yes, reskilling, but of course, the one in the mix that is so important is innovation and creativity. And creativity and innovation thrives in places where people are not just struggling to put food on the table. You need to solve survival issues so that the mind can, do what the mind does best. Yeah.
So if you're saying in 3 seconds, I'll give you in 3 bullet points then. I think the first one, right, is really, for the government. I think this is going to the government to ensure sustainable growth. Like I mentioned earlier, sustainable economic growth will lead to sustainable growth in manufacturing. So things like, duty reduction on essential raw materials needs to happen. Second is that, as the environment becomes, easy to operate in, operations will be easier. And secondly is that the performance of that sector would also be easier, leading to more jobs. And more importantly is that, SMEs within this particular industry, which is the manufacturing industry, would also be able to thrive. And then, when SMEs thrive, the things like light manufacturing in itself will also thrive. And when that thrives, we would definitely be at par with the likes of, the Ethiopian market, China, who have actually leveraged this light manufacturing subsector to be able to drive, massive growth. And I think finally is that, we need to work together, right? Government and companies need to work together to ensure that, policies that are being created and are being implemented actually have positive effects with a clear thing in mind, which is driving job, creating, more opportunities for people, and ensuring that we are able to sustain those jobs that have already been created. Thank you.
Precious, give us your final thoughts as we round up.
All right. I think unemployed and underemployed women